After spending 3 days and nights with his young lover, a guilt-ridden CEO husband came to beg his wife's forgiveness with a diamond ring, only to be met with divorce papers signed 3 days prior. A single comment from the housekeeper made him collapse on the spot. The clock pointed to 7 in the evening, and the food on the dining table had grown cold. I sat at the table, my gaze fixed on the unlit candles, my heart heavy. I picked up my phone to text my husband, James, but quickly put it down. I was afraid of receiving the familiar reply, "I'm busy in a meeting, eat without me." Just then, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A young woman's cheerful voice came through the receiver. "Hello, is this Sarah Anderson's phone? I'm calling from Bella Flora." Confused, I furrowed my brow and replied, "You have the wrong number. This is Sarah, not." "I'm sorry, who did you say you were calling for?" The employee sounded flustered. I could hear the rustling of papers before she spoke again, her voice urgent. "Oh, I apologize. It's just that this number is saved as the primary recipient in Mr. James Anderson's VIP client profile. We are currently delivering a bouquet of imported roses and a jewelry gift box to the lobby of the Astoria Grand, but we couldn't reach the recipient at the address on the order form, so we called this number." My ears rang and my heart pounded as if it would burst. James, imported roses, jewelry, and the unfamiliar name, Bella. I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. I asked again, "Could you repeat the delivery address, please? I'll go down and receive it." Without a hint of suspicion, the employee clearly stated the building and apartment number of one of New York's most luxurious residences. After I hung up, the world felt like it was spinning. James wasn't busy with a meeting. He was busy preparing a gift and declaring his love for another woman on our wedding anniversary. The flower shop's mistake was perhaps the cruelest joke the heavens could play on me. I don't remember how I drove to the Astoria Grand. The streets of Manhattan were ablaze with brilliant lights. In the midst of people bustling home, I felt like the only one lost at a crossroads in life. I parked my car in a corner with a clear view of the lobby the delivery person had mentioned. Less than 10 minutes later, a familiar luxury sedan pulled up to the entrance. The door opened, and James got out. He was wearing the same gray suit I had ironed for him that morning. A radiant smile graced his face, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in a very long time. But what shattered my heart wasn't his appearance, but the woman who came out of the building to greet him. She was very young, with long, wavy hair, wearing a thin silk dress that clung to her figure. James took the bouquet from the delivery person and gently handed it to her. Then, he pulled a red velvet box from his jacket pocket and opened it. Even under the warm lobby lights, the sparkle of the diamond on the ring was unmistakable. It was several times larger and more brilliant than the simple wedding band on my finger. The woman, Bella, giggled and extended her hand for James to slide the ring on. She stood on her tiptoes, whispered something in his ear, and he laughed heartily, pulling her waist into a tight embrace. That hug contained a level of affection and tenderness that I had never received in our 5 years of marriage, no matter how much I sacrificed or tried. While I was at home, worrying he was working too hard and preparing a hearty meal for him, he was busy building a new nest with his lover. That diamond ring was surely a perfect size for her slender finger, not for my size 7, calloused from years of housework. Tears didn't come, but a searing pain shot through my throat. I opened the car door and stepped onto the street. The night air was bitingly cold, but not as cold as my heart. I had to go to them, not out of jealousy, but to see the true face of the man I had dedicated my youth to loving. I took heavy steps toward the two, who were lost in their passionate embrace. The distance of a few dozen feet felt like thousands of miles. The sound of my heels on the pavement echoed dryly and lonely amidst the city's laughter. As I approached, it was Bella who saw me first. The smile vanished from her lips, replaced by the terrified look of a deer caught by a predator. She quickly pulled her hand back, hiding the diamond ring behind her, and burrowed into James's chest, her voice trembling. "James, it's your wife. Mrs. Anderson is here." James spun around the moment he saw me. His eyes held none of the surprise or guilt I had imagined. Instead, he furrowed his dark brows, his face a mask of undisguised irritation and disgust. He let go of Bella's hand but still stood in front of her, as if to protect her. I stopped before them and took a deep breath to keep my voice from trembling. Looking directly into James's eyes, I glanced at the magnificent rose bouquet in Bella's hands and said softly, "So, this was your meeting? The flowers are beautiful. The ring suits you too. Congratulations to you both." James scoffed coldly and adjusted the collar of his jacket. His voice was like ice. "Are you spying on me? I never knew you were such a pathetic, obsessive woman, Sarah. What I do and where I do it is my business. It's none of your concern." His words were daggers piercing my heart. I laughed bitterly. "I am your wife. Your legally recognized wife. My husband is giving another woman a ring on our wedding anniversary, and you say I have no right to be concerned? Then who does? This woman?" At my words, tears began to stream down Bella's perfectly made-up face. She clutched James's sleeve and sobbed. "James, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Mrs. Anderson, please don't blame him. He just came to see me for a moment because he felt sorry for me being all alone." Seeing his lover cry, James's expression filled with pity. He glared at me and shouted, "Shut up! What do you know to speak so recklessly? Bella is not the kind of woman you think she is. She's the person who saved my life." I was stunned. "The person who saved your life?" Every time James mentioned Bella, his voice was filled with gratitude and reverence. "Last month, on my business trip to Miami, I collapsed from anaphylactic shock in my hotel. I almost died. Bella found me and rushed me to the emergency room. She stayed by my side all night, taking care of me when I had no one. She saved my life. I owe her, and it's my duty to look after her." Listening to him, I could only laugh in disbelief. How could he believe such a clumsy, staged drama? My voice choked with indignation as I looked at him. "She took you to the ER once, and for that, you call her your savior and betray your wife? Then what about my father? What about my father who died in a burning car trying to save you in that accident years ago? Was his life worth less than her taking you to the hospital once?" The mention of my father made James pause for a moment, but his face quickly hardened again. He looked at me with cruel eyes. "I have never forgotten what your father did, but for the past 5 years, I married you, gave you the honor of being Mrs. Anderson, and supported your family without sparing a single dollar. I believe I have more than repaid that debt with this marriage, but Bella is alone now. I can't abandon her." "More than repaid?" I whispered the words, a constricting pain seizing my chest. In his eyes, my father's death and my entire life were nothing more than a debt that could be quantified and settled with money and a hollow title. The crosswalk light turned green. Bella suddenly walked up to me and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You're old news, ma'am. Let him go. This man is mine now." Before her words had even finished, she stumbled and fell into the middle of the street, right in the path of an approaching motorcycle. The sharp screech of brakes tore through the air. "Bella!" James screamed. In an instant, he rushed forward, shoved me violently aside, and wrapped his arms around her. The force of his push sent me staggering, and I fell helplessly onto the gravel-strewn sidewalk. A searing pain shot through my knees and elbows as they scraped against the ground, blood seeping through and staining my pants. James held Bella tightly in his arms and turned to me with eyes burning with hatred. He yelled in the middle of the bustling street, "You're not just obsessive, you're wicked. You pushed my savior in front of a bike? If anything happens to Bella, I will not let you get away with this." I lay there, watching the man I loved shield another woman while falsely accusing his own wife, feeling both physical and emotional agony at once. Only then did hot, salty tears begin to stream down my cheeks. I don't remember how I got home. The blood from my scraped knees and elbows had dried and stuck to my pants. Every step felt like being stabbed with needles and having salt poured on the wounds. But no physical pain could compare to the chilling cold that had enveloped my soul. The large mansion was submerged in darkness, not a single light, not a single trace of warmth. The dinner I had prepared for our 5th anniversary sat lonely on the table, as cold and empty as my marriage. I sank to the floor in a corner of the kitchen without turning on the lights, letting the darkness swallow me. My tears had long since dried up. As midnight approached, the roar of a car engine shattered the silence outside. The front door was thrown open violently, slamming against the wall with a loud bang. James entered, his body reeking of alcohol and the cheap perfume Bella wore. He didn't see the wounds on my body or the untouched dinner. His eyes were bloodshot, piercing me with rage and contempt. He pointed a finger upstairs and, though his voice was slurred with drink, it was still menacing. "Get upstairs to the family chapel right now, and don't even think about taking one step out of there without my permission." I looked up at him and asked in a faint voice, "What did I do wrong? Why are you doing this to me? I was the one who fell." "Still got a mouth on you, don't you?" James cut me off, his shout echoing through the house. "Blinded by jealousy, you push my savior in front of a moving vehicle?" Bella's arms and legs are all scraped up, and she's in psychological shock. How could a delicate girl like her handle a venomous woman like you? The Anderson family has always valued decency. I will not tolerate a wife with a serpent's heart like yours. Go up there, kneel before our ancestors' memorials, and repent. Our housekeeper, Maria, who had come out of the main bedroom, saw my wretched state and rushed over in shock. She knelt at James's feet, crying and pleading, "Mr. Anderson, please, calm down." "Mrs. Anderson isn't feeling well. It's that time of the month, and she hasn't eaten all day. If you punish her like this, something terrible could happen." James scoffed coldly and pushed Maria's hand away. "It's because you spoil her that she's turned out this way. Using menstrual cramps as an excuse? Bella is injured and hasn't complained once. That woman is as strong as an ox. Do you think kneeling for one night will kill her? Anyone who sides with her will be fired immediately." I looked at the man before me, a chilling sense of unfamiliarity washing over me. For the past 5 years, I had sacrificed my health to secure deals for him. I had drunk on his behalf until I developed ulcers and stayed up all night preparing bid proposals. Now, in his eyes, I was just a creature as strong as an ox, incapable of feeling pain. I pushed Maria's hand away and struggled to my feet. A pathetic smile touched my lips. I looked James straight in the eye and said, "Fine, I'll kneel. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I want to see just how far your conscience has rotted." I dragged my heavy feet up to the attic. The family chapel was cold, and the smell of incense made the atmosphere even more desolate. Outside, thunder and lightning split the sky, and the rain poured down relentlessly. A draft seeping through a poorly sealed window chilled me to the bone. I knelt on the cold marble floor. The chill from my knees traveled up my spine, mixing with the severe menstrual cramps, making my head spin. My empty stomach began to cramp, and a pain as if someone were twisting a knife inside me washed over. I bit my lip hard to keep from crying out. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. Outside, the rain continued unabated. The sound of it hitting the tin roof was like my heart shattering into pieces. I thought of my late father. He had also died on a rainy night like this, burned to an unrecognizable state in a fire to save the life of his precious son-in-law. And now, that very son-in-law was punishing his daughter. My youth, my sacrifices, my pride, it had all come down to this one night of humiliating punishment. As the physical pain intensified, my vision blurred, and the world around me grew dark. Before I lost consciousness completely, I heard a clap of thunder that seemed to tear the sky apart. It sounded like fate's furious cry at my life. I awoke to the sharp smell of antiseptic. My head was dizzy, and my entire body ached as if every bone had been taken apart and put back together. Maria was sitting by my bed. When she saw me open my eyes, she joyfully squeezed my hand, her own eyes welling with tears. "Mrs. Anderson, you're awake! Thank goodness, you were running a high fever for a whole day. I was so worried something would happen." As I opened my mouth to ask where I was, the hospital room door burst open. It wasn't the doctor, nor was it James. It was my father-in-law, Richard Anderson. He entered with a cold expression, devoid of any concern or sympathy. 2 burly bodyguards stood behind him. He looked at me as if I were a broken object and threw out a single, callous remark. "Good, you're awake. Get ready. James has been in an accident." My ears were ringing. "James in an accident?" Maria spoke in a terrified, trembling voice. "Mr. Anderson, he was street racing yesterday, trying to show off for that miss." "Bella," they said, and his car hit the center divider. "He's in the emergency room now, but they say he's lost too much blood." Richard Anderson struck the floor with his cane. The dry thud cut off Maria's words. He looked at me with sharp eyes, his gaze filled with calculated intent. "That boy has a rare Rh-negative blood type. The hospital's blood bank is empty, and there's no time to source it from outside. In this family, you're the only one with a matching blood type. You owe him your life, so now it's time to fulfill your duty." I stared at him blankly. My body had just recovered from collapsing after a night in the wind and rain. My fever hadn't even fully subsided, and I was anemic from my period. And now, he wanted me to donate blood to save his son? I laughed weakly, my voice hoarse. "Father, I just collapsed from exhaustion. The doctor said I need rest. Drawing my blood now would be the same as killing me. He has his lover, doesn't he? Why don't you ask her to donate?" Richard Anderson sneered, a look of contempt spreading across his old face. He leaned in and whispered in my ear, his voice as cold as a serpent's. "She's O-positive, it won't work, and you don't have the right to refuse. I know your father's ashes are kept in the St. Patrick's Cathedral columbarium. If you donate 800 cc of blood and save James, I'll use my influence to get that urn into your hands. You can lay him to rest properly in your hometown. But if you refuse, well, it's a shame that Cathedral is scheduled for demolition for a redevelopment project soon. Your father wouldn't rest easy if his ashes were mixed with dust and rubble." I was speechless. My father's urn was my most precious possession and my only weakness. In the past, I had trusted the Anderson family's power and had his ashes interred in a place they sponsored. I never dreamed it would become a tool to blackmail me. The cruelty of this family was beyond human imagination. I looked at Richard Anderson, at the cold-bloodedness deep in his eyes. I knew I had no other choice. James's life didn't matter to me, but I could not give up my father's peaceful rest. "All right, I'll do it." I uttered each word, heavy as lead. "But you must keep your promise. I want my father's urn back as soon as this is over." Richard Anderson nodded in satisfaction and gestured to the doctor. I was moved to the blood donation room. A thick needle pierced my skin, and my red blood flowed out of my weak body to give life to the betrayer lying in the next room. 400 cc, 600 cc. My head began to spin. My vision blurred, my heart raced, and it became hard to breathe. The doctor spoke to Richard Anderson with concern. "Mr. Anderson, drawing 800 cc at once is extremely dangerous for the patient's condition. She could go into shock." "I don't care. Keep drawing. My son has to live. His life is more important," Richard Anderson commanded coldly, without even a single glance in my direction. I closed my eyes. Tears soaked my pillow. In my hazy consciousness, I saw my father smiling and waving at me. "This 800 cc of blood is the last debt I am repaying to the Anderson family. From now on, our connection is completely severed." I woke up after being in a deep coma for over a day. The first thing I felt was a sense of emptiness and lightness, as if my soul had left my body. My right arm, where the IV had been, was bruised, dark blue, and throbbing. There was no one by my side. No flowers, no fruit, just the sterile hospital room filled with the hum of the air conditioner. I struggled to sit up, a wave of dizziness forcing me to grip the bed rail tightly. I stumbled my way to the intensive care unit where James was. Through the glass window, I could see he was awake. His face was pale, but he seemed much more lucid. But what I saw inside horrified me. Bella was sitting by his bed, feeding him oatmeal one spoonful at a time. She was wearing a patient's gown, a white bandage wrapped around her wrist, looking incredibly pitiful and frail. James looked at her with eyes full of gratitude and love, holding her injured hand as if it were a precious treasure. When I opened the door and entered, they both turned in surprise. The moment James saw me, his expression turned icy, the previous tenderness vanishing completely. Though still weak, he shouted in a voice full of reproach, "What are you doing here? Your husband is on the brink of death, and you don't even show your face. Where have you been gallivanting all day to only show up now? You truly are a heartless, cold-blooded woman." I froze on the spot, a lump forming in my throat. I looked at Bella, then at James, and laughed bitterly. Me, heartless? Do you have any idea why I couldn't come? Who do you think? Enough! James cut me off. He looked at Bella with adoration and pointed to her. Learn from Bella. With her delicate body, even though she doesn't have a rare blood type, she risked her own health to donate blood for me and collapsed on the spot. This woman loves me enough to risk her life. But you are a selfish, cowardly woman who only thinks of herself. Bella lowered her head, covering her face with her hands as she sobbed, her shoulders trembling delicately. James, don't scold her, I volunteered. As long as you could live, I would be fine even if I died. Watching this play unfold, I felt a chilling sense of disgust. The bandage on Bella's wrist was nothing but a prop for her second life-saving performance. She was stealing my credit, shamelessly accepting the gratitude that I had earned by risking my life to give 800 cc of blood. And my husband, James, believed her without a shadow of a doubt. I didn't try to explain or argue. What was the use of explaining when a person's heart had already changed? In his eyes, I was already a thorn in his side. When despair hits rock bottom, a strange sense of peace takes over. Just then, the hospital room door opened again. Richard Anderson's personal lawyer entered, carrying a thick stack of documents. He placed them on the table and pushed them toward me. Mrs. Anderson, the chairman has kept his promise. This is the transfer document for your father's urn. A car is waiting at the main entrance for you to go and retrieve it. And this is a pre-drafted divorce agreement. If you sign it, the chairman will wire you an alimony of $500,000. James seemed momentarily surprised by the divorce papers, but when he glanced at the frail-looking Bella beside him, he remained silent, giving his tacit consent. He looked at me with a challenging expression, as if daring me to sign. Without hesitation, I picked up the pen. I wrote my name firmly and forcefully on the fateful document. I didn't need to read the clauses, nor did I care about the paltry $500,000. All I needed was my freedom and my father's peace. I don't need the money, I said firmly. Use it to buy yourselves a clue. I'll just take what's mine. I slipped the wedding ring off my finger and placed it on the table next to the half-eaten bowl of oatmeal. The sound of metal hitting glass echoed coldly, like the final shard of our tear-stained 5-year marriage. May you two enjoy your fraudulent happiness for a very, very long time. With those words, I turned and walked away without a single backward glance. My steps were unsteady, but my back was straight. A week later, James was discharged from the hospital. Thanks to Bella's devoted care and expensive medication, his health recovered quickly. On the way home, James stopped by the largest jewelry store in the city and picked out a new diamond ring, more expensive and of a newer design than the one he had previously given Bella. In his mind, he believed my signing the divorce papers was an impulsive act, a power play to tame him. He was convinced that all women love diamonds, and if he just humbled himself a little and offered a gift, I would return to being his obedient wife. He probably thought I had nowhere else to go anyway. How could a woman with no career and no background survive after leaving the Anderson family? The luxury sedan pulled up in front of the mansion. James, holding the velvet box, whistled as he got out of the car, but the moment he stepped inside, the smile on his face vanished. The house was eerily empty. The comforting smell of food that usually wafted from the kitchen was gone. The carefully arranged vase of flowers on the living room table was gone, and the small, delicate figure of his wife, who always rushed to take his briefcase and help him out of his jacket, was gone. Everything was cold and silent, like an abandoned house. "Sarah? Sarah, where are you?" James called out, but there was no answer. From the kitchen, Maria emerged, looking exhausted. Her eyes were swollen as if she had been crying for days. She stood before James, her trembling hands clasped together, and pulled a letter and my old wedding ring from her apron pocket. It was the ring I had left at the hospital, which the lawyer had brought back and given to her. "Mr. Anderson," Maria's voice was choked with emotion. "Mrs. Anderson, she's gone. She left the day you were admitted to the hospital. She packed up all of her personal belongings, leaving nothing behind." James snatched the ring and the envelope and tore it open. Inside was only the divorce paper with my signature and a small note. He scanned it, his face turning crimson with rage. "She really left?" James threw the velvet box with the new diamond ring to the floor. The box sprang open, and the ring rolled under the sofa, glinting forlornly. Maria lowered her head and, in a trembling voice, relayed my final words. Each syllable was like a needle piercing James's sky-high pride. Before she left, Mrs. Anderson asked me to pass on a message to you. She said, she wishes you a long and happy marriage with that woman. Hearing those words, James froze. He couldn't believe his ears. A long and happy marriage? Was that a blessing or a curse? How could the woman who had devoted her youth to loving him, who had endured silently for 5 years, turn her back so easily and coldly? Lies! You're lying, Maria! James shouted, kicking a nearby chair. She's putting on a show. This is just a tactic to make me go find her and beg her to come back. Not a chance. Let's see how many days she can last without my money. We'll see how long that pride of hers lasts. He paced the living room frantically, breathing heavily. He tried to convince himself that I was just angry and would soon come back, kneel, and beg for forgiveness. But deep in his anxious eyes, a vague fear began to blossom. The house, devoid of my warmth, felt terrifyingly large and lonely. He had never imagined my absence would leave such a vast void. James took out his phone and dialed my number. The mechanical voice, "The customer you have called is unavailable," was like a slap across his face. I had blocked his number. I had cut off all contact. This time, I was truly gone. James believed I was just playing hide and seek. He thought a woman who had spent a year in the kitchen without a penny to her name would be like a fish out of water without the protection of the Anderson family. In his eyes, my silence was just a ploy for more attention, a way to provoke him by pretending to be unaffected by his absence, hiding somewhere and watching him. James decided to throw a lavish birthday party for Bella at our mansion. He decorated the house magnificently and invited all of his friends and close business partners. James's secretary, Mr. Stevens, who had witnessed my tragedy from beginning to end, was the only one who knew where I was. He came to the rundown apartment in a quiet part of the city where I was temporarily staying. He looked troubled and sorry. Mr. Stevens placed a luxurious gold-embossed invitation on the table and said hesitantly, "Mrs. Anderson, the chairman insisted I bring you. He said that if you don't come and watch him be happy, he will send people to disturb your father's resting place." I picked up the invitation. With my thin fingers, I lightly brushed over the embossed letters, spelling out the party's guest of honor, Bella. A bitter smile spread across my lips. He always knew how to touch my only weakness. "I'll go," I said, my voice so calm it even surprised Mr. Stevens. "But I'm not going to offer my blessings. I'm going to get back what's mine." That night, the mansion glowed with brilliant lights, and the sounds of sweet music and clinking glasses filled the air. I stood outside the iron gates, looking at the place that had been my home for the past 5 years. Now, it was a stage for another woman to play the role of the lady of the house. Instead of a fancy dress, I wore a simple beige shirt dress and light makeup to cover my pallor. When I entered, the noise in the living room momentarily subsided. Curious eyes turned towards me. Some were pitiful, some were mocking, and some were anticipating an entertaining spectacle. Bella was at the center of the party, by James's side. She wore a striking red dress with a deep V-neck, and a triumphant smile appeared on her face as she saw me, wineglass in hand. James looked at me with a satisfied glint in his eye. He thought I had finally given in and come back to beg. He raised his wineglass and spoke loudly. "Thank you all for coming. Today, on the birthday of Bella, the woman who gave me a new lease on life, I want to give her a special gift." He clapped his hands, and a servant brought over an ornate wooden box. James opened it and took out a gleaming gold medal. It was the medal he had won in his first international car racing competition 6 years ago. A memento he had said was more precious than his life. For the past 5 years, I had polished it myself and kept it in a glass display case, considering it a symbol of the hardships we had overcome together. But now, he held it in his hand and, in front of all these people, tenderly placed it around Bella's neck. James announced loudly, "This medal symbolizes my glory. From now on, my glory is yours as well. You deserve this more than anyone." Bella leaned against him, feigning shyness, but her eyes shot a provocative glance at me. My heart felt as if it were being squeezed, and I couldn't breathe. It wasn't because of jealousy, but because of regret. Regret for the youthful years I had dedicated to cherishing a man. In the end, the things I held most dear were being made a public spectacle by him, handed over to someone who had no idea of the sweat and tears hidden behind them. The air in the party froze. After the ostentatious gift-giving ceremony, people started whispering, and pitying glances were once again directed at me. They were expecting a jealous tantrum, the tears of a abandoned wife, or at least a breakdown. But I did none of those things. I straightened my back, took a deep breath to calm the pain in my chest, and slowly walked towards the couple. My high heels clicked rhythmically and decisively on the cold marble floor. James saw me, and the smile on his face froze. He had expected begging, but my eyes held nothing but the stillness of a dead lake. I stopped just close enough to be out of reach of Bella's strong perfume, but close enough to clearly see the artifice on her face. I looked at the gold medal on Bella's chest, then looked up at James and said quietly but clearly, "James, do you remember when you won this medal? Who stayed up for 3 nights sewing your torn racing suit? Who sold her mother's heirloom necklace to buy a plane ticket so you could compete?" James flinched, a look of embarrassment crossing his face. The old memories he had tried so hard to bury were being laid bare by my words. He opened his mouth to retort, but I didn't give him the chance. I shifted my gaze to Bella, my eyes stopping on her left hand holding the wine glass. On her red-painted ring finger, my old wedding ring was awkwardly worn. It didn't have a large diamond like the ones Bella received, an old-fashioned design, but it was the symbol of the lifelong promise I once believed in. I smiled so coldly that Bella took a step back in revulsion. I pointed to the ring and said, "Miss Bella, do you enjoy picking up things that others have used? That metal is covered in my fingerprints from polishing it for 5 years, and the inside of that ring you're wearing still has my name engraved on it. Would you like to take it off and show everyone the words, James and Sarah, 2018? Bella's face turned white, and she quickly covered the ring on her left hand with her right. She looked around in panic, feeling the mocking gazes of the crowd on her. No matter how favored a mistress she was, having to wear the first wife's old wedding ring made her look cheap and pathetic. Seeing his lover being humiliated, James's anger flared up again. He grabbed Bella's hand, pulled her behind him, and glared at me, shouting, "Shut up! You came here to cause a scene, didn't you? You're the one who threw that ring away. It's my choice who I give it to." The fact that Bella didn't mind that it was old just shows how gracious and frugal she is. What right do you have to criticize her? Looking at the man bristling like a porcupine to protect his mistress, my heart grew completely cold. Gracious and frugal? The beautiful words that came out of his mouth to defend a thief sounded so bitter. "I'm not criticizing," I replied calmly. "I'm just letting you know. No matter how hard you try to wear something that belongs to someone else, it will never truly fit you. Just like the position of the lady of this house, you might be able to sit in it, but whether you can keep it is up to you." After finishing my sentence, I took a stack of documents from my bag and placed them on the party table. They were the share transfer documents for the small stake my parents had invested in his company in the past. It was something I had to get back to cut all ties. "Sign here. Give me back my shares, and I'll leave immediately. I can't stand to breathe the same air as you two for another second." Bella, who had been standing behind James, her expression changed from fear to resentment. She knew that if she let me leave so triumphantly, she would forever be seen as the loser in people's eyes. Suddenly, she changed her tune. She stepped forward, lightly tugged on James's sleeve, and said in a trembling, resigned voice, "James, Sarah is right. I was out of line. Please let me talk to her alone. I want to apologize properly." James hesitated for a moment before nodding, not forgetting to give me a warning look. "Don't get any ideas. If you do anything to Bella, I won't let you get away with it." Bella led me to the second-floor balcony, a place completely separated from the noise of the party. The night wind blew her hair back, revealing a sharp, calculating, and ambitious face, devoid of the innocent and frail demeanor from moments ago. She leaned against the railing and laughed contemptuously. "Sarah, did you think you could win by coming here and acting all noble? James loves me now. He trusts me. "Do you know why he despises you so much?" I told him. "I told him you hired thugs to assault me, and that's why I almost had a miscarriage. Of course, the baby never existed." I looked at her, horrified by the wickedness of the human heart. I said, "How can you tell such blatant lies without fear of divine retribution? The truth always comes out." "Divine retribution?" Bella laughed sharply, a chilling and eerie sound. "In this day and age, whoever wins the man's heart wins the truth. Look at you. I'm wearing your ring, living in your house, and sleeping with your husband. What do you have left?" Then she suddenly took off the wedding ring and threw it hard onto the lawn below. She turned to me with a crazed look in her eyes and whispered, "Let me help you leave here faster." Before I could understand what was happening, Bella climbed onto the railing herself. She had calculated it meticulously. Below were a soft lawn and low bushes. The height of the second floor wasn't enough to be fatal, but it was enough to stage a pitiful injury. "Sarah, don't push me! Help! James!" Her sharp scream cut through the quiet night. Bella let go, and her body fell. I instinctively rushed to grab her, but my hand only brushed against the slippery silk of her dress. Thud. It wasn't a loud noise, but it was enough to make my heart stop. The balcony door burst open. James rushed out like a storm. What he saw was me standing by the railing in shock, my hand still outstretched as if I had just pushed someone. And below, Bella was groaning and writhing on the lawn. Without asking any questions, James spun around and slapped me across the face. Crack! The blow was so hard I staggered, my head spinning. The metallic taste of blood immediately filled my mouth. He grabbed me by the collar. His bloodshot eyes were filled with terrifying veins, and he growled like a wounded animal. "I warned you. How dare you? How dare you push her? You tried to kill her." I looked at him. One cheek was burning hot, and my ears were ringing so loudly I couldn't hear the music from inside. I didn't cry, nor did I try to explain. I knew that in this man's eyes, I had been found guilty long ago. That slap shattered not only my face but also the last remaining shred of our marital bond. Under the lights spilling from the party, our two shadows on the cold tile floor were grotesquely twisted. I saw disgust in his eyes, and I saw something dying inside my soul. I raised my hand and wiped the blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. The metallic taste lingered on my tongue. James's slap was not just physical pain. It was the blade that finally snapped the rubber band of my sanity, which had been stretched to its limit. I straightened myself and adjusted the collar he had crumpled. I looked straight into the burning eyes of the man I once called my husband, and said in a voice so calm it surprised even myself, "James, my father's life gave you a second chance, and my 5 years of youth gave you success. And this slap, I'll count it as interest for your betrayal. Now, we are even." James flinched at my attitude. He let go of me and took a step back. His eyes wavered, but his arrogance still won out. He pointed to the lawn below, where people were helping Bella up, and growled at me. "Even? You did that to Bella and you dare say we're even? Don't even think about leaving this house. Stevens, lock this woman in the storage room. I'll take Bella to the hospital and deal with her when I get back." Mr. Stevens hesitated before approaching me with an apologetic look. "Mrs. Anderson, please follow me. Don't anger the chairman any further." I didn't resist and quietly followed Mr. Stevens to the damp storage room behind the garden. The heavy iron door closed, and the lock clicked shut. I was trapped in darkness and the smell of mold. I sat down in a corner, hugging my knees, and listened to the ambulance sirens wail and fade into the distance. The whole mansion fell silent again, leaving me alone between 4 cold walls. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed every face, every word, every cruel act this family had inflicted on me. My father-in-law forced me to donate blood, my husband framed me, and his mistress schemed against me. I realized that if I stayed here for one more second, I would slowly die not of illness, but of injustice. At 2 a.m, when the only sound outside was the chirping of crickets, I stood up. The storage room was locked tight, but they had forgotten that the iron bars on the high ventilation window had long been loose. It was a small detail I had meant to call a repairman for, but had forgotten in the bustle of taking care of James. I stacked some old boxes and struggled my way up. My weakened body and old wounds made me breathless, sweat pouring down my face. I shook the iron bars with all my might, and soon, a rusty bar came loose, creating a gap just big enough for a slender person like me to squeeze through. I pulled myself through the window and fell with a thud onto the damp dirt behind the garden. A sharp pain shot through my ankle, but I gritted my teeth and endured it. I didn't dare to look back at the magnificent mansion. It wasn't a home. It was a tomb where my youth was buried. I walked through the dark night, avoiding the security cameras and following small alleyways. A light rain began to fall. The cold raindrops hit my face and unhealed wounds, but my mind felt clearer than ever. By the time the sun rose, I had reached the bus terminal. I had only a few $100s in cash and my ID in my pocket. I bought a ticket to Seaside, Oregon, a distant coastal city where no one knew me, where no one knew my shameful past. The very next afternoon, Bella officially moved in. She arrived with dozens of suitcases, big and small, and completely took over the closet I used to use. She threw my simple clothes into the trash and filled the space with flashy, expensive designer items. Bella strutted around the house with the air of a true mistress, ordering Maria around with a haughty and demanding tone. James thought that by bringing his savior home, his life would be filled with happiness and sweet affection, but reality was much harsher than he had imagined. Bella was not a domestic woman. She was beautiful, but like a parasitic vine, she lived off others. Unlike me, who would wake up early every morning to iron my husband's clothes, Bella slept in until noon. James had to rummage through a messy pile of clothes to find a tie. Some were wrinkled, some didn't match. The warm, nutritious breakfast I always prepared was gone. In its place were stale pieces of bread or cold, greasy takeout. One evening, James came home from a difficult meeting, hoping for some peace. But what greeted him was a living room that looked like a war zone. Bella's bags, shoes, and makeup were scattered on the sofa, the table, and even the floor. Loud music blared from a Bluetooth speaker, and Bella was lying down with a face mask on, chatting with her friends. Her loud laughter pierced the air. James frowned, his exhaustion evident. He lightly kicked a handbag blocking his way and said irritably, "Can you clean this up? The house looks like a flea market. Where's Maria? Hasn't she cleaned?" Bella, startled, took off her mask and clung to his arm, trying to be cute. "Oh, honey, you're home? I let Maria leave early. I was just trying out some new makeup. Why are you so angry?" "I'll clean it up tomorrow." James pushed her hand away. He looked around the cold house, devoid of the touch of his first wife. He suddenly missed my neatness and attentiveness, things he had once taken for granted. The seed of comparison, of regret, began to sprout in his heart. James's patience slowly wore thin in the trivialities of daily life. The real conflict erupted on a stormy night, just like the one when he had made me kneel. That day, James had been entertaining clients and came home late, having drunk a lot. His stomach was already weak, and with his recent irregular meals, his gastritis flared up. He collapsed onto the bed, his face pale, breaking out in a cold sweat, clutching his stomach and writhing in pain. "Bella, Bella," James called out weakly. "Go to the kitchen and make me some soup, quickly. It hurts so much." Bella, who had been sound asleep, woke up with an annoyed expression. She grumbled and reluctantly went down to the kitchen. About 20 minutes later, she returned with a steaming bowl of soup. The strong smell of ginger hit his nose. "Here, honey. Drink it while it's hot." "I put in a lot of ginger to help settle your stomach," Bella said in a sleepy voice, putting down the bowl and about to climb back into bed. James struggled to sit up and took a large gulp of the soup, but as soon as he swallowed, he spat it out, coughing violently. The strong taste of raw ginger stung his throat and made his inflamed stomach contract even more fiercely. "What did you put in this?" James shouted, swiping his hand and knocking the bowl to the floor. The hot soup splashed everywhere, landing on Bella's legs, and she screamed, "James, what are you doing? I went to all the trouble to make that for you, and you just throw it away?" Bella cried and threw a fit. James clutched his stomach, his face red with anger and pain. "How long have we been living together, and you still don't know I'm allergic to ginger? My stomach is killing me, and you put ginger in the soup? Are you trying to kill me?" Sarah never did this. She always made me chicken noodle soup or congee. She never made me drink this garbage." The mention of my name made Bella flinch. A surge of jealousy burned away even her fear. She screamed, "Sarah, Sarah, it's always Sarah. If you liked her so much, why don't you go find her? You're the one who kicked her out, and now you're taking it out on me? I'm the one who saved your life. How can you do this to your savior?" James looked at the screaming woman and felt an extreme sense of disappointment and disgust. The person who saved his life? Why did that title sound so grating and awkward now? He remembered the times he had come home drunk in the past. There was always a gentle hand wiping his face, a bowl of warm soup on the nightstand, and absolute silence maintained so he could rest. Bella's carelessness was like a bucket of cold water to the face, and he began to dimly realize how much he had lost. He threw Bella out of the room and curled up in the darkness, enduring the physical pain and the emptiness of his soul. The stomach ache subsided a little, but the pain in his heart began to burn slowly. In his drunken haze and the solitude that filled the large room, James's reason was gradually consumed by emotion. He picked up his phone and unconsciously scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a familiar name, "My Loving Wife." Despite having declared our divorce, he hadn't changed my contact name. The clock showed 2 in the morning, and outside, the rain was still falling. The sound of it hitting the window pane was mournful. James, with a faint hope, pressed the call button. He thought that maybe, just as I had for the past few years, I would still be awake, worrying about him. He deluded himself into thinking that if he just called, I would soften and ask him where it hurt, what medicine he needed. The phone rang for a long time. In a small rented room in Seaside, I was sitting by the window, listening to the distant sound of the waves. I couldn't sleep. The wounds in my heart were still too fresh. When James's number appeared on the screen, my heart skipped a beat, but it quickly returned to its calm rhythm. I answered the phone and said nothing. Only the sound of my quiet breathing was transmitted through the receiver. "Sarah, it's me." James's voice was heavy with fatigue and pain. "My stomach hurts so much. I can't find the medicine you left. Can you come home and help me find it?" Hearing his voice, I laughed. He had ruthlessly thrown me out, humiliated me in front of his mistress, and now he was whining like a child as if nothing had happened. I took a deep breath, and a voice as cold as ice, shattering all his illusions, came out. "Mr. Stevens knows where the medicine is. Ask him. If you still can't find it, then call your savior. Since she saved your life, she should be able to fix a stomachache." "What are you talking about? Are you still mad at me?" James sounded flustered, his voice trembling slightly. I laughed coldly, a laugh devoid of any warmth. "I'm not mad. I'm just disgusted. James, we're divorced. Whether you live or die is no longer my business. Unless you're on your deathbed, don't call this number again. You're disturbing my sleep." Sarah. "How dare you?" I decisively pressed the end call button before he could finish. Then I went into my settings and added his number to the permanent block list. After doing all that, I put down my phone, feeling a sense of liberation, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. On the other end of the line, James stood there stunned, listening to the endless dial tone. He tried calling again, but only got a busy signal. He threw his phone against the wall, and the screen shattered. For the first time in his life, James tasted the feeling of being ruthlessly abandoned and rejected by the woman he thought would be subservient to him forever. The next morning, while James was suffering from a hangover, Mr. Stevens arrived at the mansion. The loyal secretary was carrying a briefcase, his face serious and somewhat apologetic. Bella had gone out shopping, leaving only the 2 men in the house. Mr. Stevens placed a file on the table, which was still littered with the broken pieces of last night's soup bowl. "Mr. Anderson," Mr. Stevens began hesitantly, "this document arrived from the court this morning. The divorce proceedings between you and Mrs. Anderson have been finalized." James, who had been massaging his temples, shot up at those words and snatched the papers. The words "Decree of Divorce" were clearly visible. Below was the red seal of the court. "What is this? Why so soon?" James's hands trembled as he held the paper. "I haven't been to court. There was no mediation. How can it be over? Who did this?" Mr. Stevens lowered his head and said in a small voice, "It was your father, sir. The chairman personally intervened and used his connections to expedite the process. He said that since you both had already signed, there was no need to drag it out. James was stunned. It was true that he had signed the papers in a fit of anger at the hospital, but he never expected his father to act so decisively and cruelly. He stormed out of the house and drove like a madman to Richard Anderson's mansion. In his father's study, James slammed the divorce decree on the desk, his face red with fury. "Father, why did you do this? Why were you in such a hurry to divorce me? I haven't—" Richard Anderson sat in his chair, calmly sipping tea, looking at his frantic son with cold eyes. He spoke as if discussing business. "Haven't what? Were you planning to keep that woman as a decoration? It's good that she left. It saves me the trouble. I've found a new match for you. The daughter of the Southern Real Estate Group. Good family, beautiful, and talented. 1,000 times better than that country bumpkin." "I don't need it," James shouted. "I'm not your puppet. I will decide my own marriage." "Decide?" Richard Anderson sneered. "What have you decided? Bringing that brazen mistress into the house and making yourself a laughingstock of the world, was that your decision? Listen carefully. It's a stroke of luck for that Sarah girl that she left. And you? Have your fun with that Bella girl and then get rid of her. Get ready for your arranged marriage. The Anderson family does not accept a daughter-in-law who brings no benefit." James looked at his father and felt a chill run down his spine. In his eyes, I was a tool that had outlived its usefulness, and Bella was just his son's plaything. Affection, morality, conscience, all of it was meaningless in the face of profit and prestige. James left the room with the marriage certificate in his hand, but his heart felt anything but free. Instead, a sense of emptiness and loss washed over him. He had truly lost me. He had lost the only person in the world who had loved him unconditionally, without any calculation. And now, he was left alone in a cold family full of schemes. Bella was not a fool. She quickly noticed the change in James's eyes. The initial passionate love had cooled, replaced by a gaze filled with doubt, comparison, and disappointment. She started to get scared. Her parasitic instincts told her that if she didn't do something, the position of mistress of the house she had just won would soon be shaken. So, Bella embarked on a full-scale image makeover. She secretly looked at the photos of me that James hadn't thrown away, examined the clothes I had left in the storage room one by one, and even questioned Maria about my habits. One morning, James came downstairs to get ready for work. He stopped in his tracks when he saw the woman in the living room. Bella had shed her usual tight-fitting, low-cut, provocative clothes. Instead, she was wearing a simple and elegant ivory silk dress, exactly the style I used to favor. Her trendy brown wavy hair had been replaced with long, straight black hair. She was trying hard to smile gently and virtuously. "James, honey, I made you breakfast. I heard you like chicken noodle soup, so I woke up early to make the broth." James froze, his gaze fixed on the dress Bella was wearing. It was the dress I had worn on our anniversary last year, a dress I cherished but had left behind when I left. Seeing Bella in that dress, James felt not a sense of excitement, but a jarring awkwardness. The dress was slightly too big for my slender frame, but it was tight on Bella's waist, revealing a less than elegant figure. The strong Chanel perfume she wore mixed with the smell of food, creating a cloying scent completely different from the warm, woody fragrance I used to wear. James walked over but didn't sit at the table. He asked coldly, "Who told you to go through Sarah's things? Who gave you permission to wear her clothes?" Bella was startled, her smile freezing on her face. She stammered, trying to make an excuse in her usual cute, coquettish tone. "I just thought it was pretty, so I tried it on. She's gone, and it would be a waste to throw it away. I wore it for you. You like this style, don't you?" "Take it off," James growled, his voice laced with undisguised disgust. "Now, do you think you can become her just by wearing her clothes and having her hairstyle? You look like a cheap knockoff. It's fake and pathetic." His words were like a slap across Bella's face. She stood there stunned, tears of humiliation streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't understand. She was younger, prettier, and knew how to handle men better than I did. But why, when she put on my shell, did she look so shabby in his eyes? James kicked over the bowl of chicken noodle soup, which Bella had likely just bought from a local store and poured into a bowl. He walked past the spilled broth and left for work, leaving Bella alone with her humiliation and the harsh truth. The original has grace, but the copy only has the form, and when a man starts to compare, the one who came later is always the loser. In the following days, the atmosphere in the mansion became even more suffocating. Bella didn't dare to play her clumsy imitation game anymore, but the anxiety in her heart grew. She realized that even though I was gone, my shadow permeated every corner of the house, every one of James's habits. One evening, James came home earlier than usual. He went straight to the bedroom to look for an important document. When he opened the nightstand where I used to keep my small belongings, he paused. The drawer was empty, but his gaze happened to fall on a small trash can in the corner of the room, which Bella had just hastily cleaned. Under a crumpled tissue, he saw a familiar metallic glint. James bent down and picked it up. It was our wedding ring, the simple ring I had left at the hospital, the one Maria had later retrieved and placed on the dresser. James held the ring and wiped off the dust. He held it up to the light, carefully examining the engraving inside. James and Sarah, forever. The letters had faded slightly over the years, but now they seemed like evidence of a shattered vow. Bella came out of the bathroom and saw James holding the ring, and she was startled. She rushed over and tried to snatch it from him. "James, are you still keeping that old thing? I saw it lying around the other day and thought it was trash, so I threw it away. Give it to me. I'll throw it out. It's bad luck." James pulled his hand back and looked at her with sharp eyes. "Trash? You called the memento of my 5-year marriage trash. Who told you to touch the things in this room? How many times have I told you? Never touch Sarah's things." Bella flinched. She never expected James to react so strongly over his ex-wife's old ring. Her voice turned sour with jealousy. "You still can't forget her, can you? She's the one who abandoned you, signed the divorce papers, and even blessed us. What are you going to do with that ring? Cherish the memory of a dead person?" James didn't answer Bella. He quietly slipped the ring onto his own ring finger. It was a little tight now, but the familiar sensation of the cold metal against his skin made his heart ache. He remembered the day I had put this ring on his finger. My trembling hands, my eyes shining with happiness. "You're right," James said in a voice as low as a sigh. "The love may be dead, but the bond isn't something you can just throw in the trash like you do. Leave. I want to be alone." Bella's face turned red with anger. She stomped her foot, turned, and slammed the door on her way out. She knew that the ring was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a thorn in her side, an anchor that tied James to the past. That night, James lay in the large bed, fiddling with the wedding ring. After so many days intoxicated by new love, for the first time he felt the emotion of regret. Regret seeped in like a slow poison, gnawing at his conscience, and he began to ask himself what he had thrown away to get the woman he called his savior. Bella's false peace did not last long. One morning, as James was just entering the office, he felt the strange gazes of his employees. They were gathered in small groups, whispering, and as soon as they saw him, they fell silent and scattered back to their desks. A sense of foreboding washed over him. James went straight to his office and called for Mr. Stevens. "What's going on? Why is everyone looking at me like that?" James asked sternly. Mr. Stevens hesitated for a moment before placing a tablet on the desk and opening the hottest trending news page. He said carefully, "Mr. Anderson, you need to see this. A video was leaked this morning, and it's spreading like wildfire." James looked at the screen. It was a video extracted from a blind spot in the mansion's security cameras on the night of Bella's birthday. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to see everything. In the video, Bella and I were on the balcony, and there was no scene of me pushing or shouting at her. Instead, viewers could clearly see Bella snatching the ring, throwing it, and then climbing over the railing and jumping onto the lawn. The headline was sensational: "The truth behind the innocent victim act. Mistress stages suicide, attempt to frame first wife, blind CEO fooled." Below the article, there were thousands of angry comments from people online. "Wow, this woman deserves an Oscar for her acting. The first wife is so pitiful. falsely accused and slapped by her husband, and she couldn't say a word. That husband is truly blind. Ditching his loyal wife for a fox like that. Let's boycott that company. With a CEO of such low moral character, how can they do business properly? James's hands trembled as he read each comment. His face was drained of all color. This video was 1,000 times more painful and humiliating than the slap he had given me. It was all an act. Bella had deceived him, using his trust and protection to harm me. The office phone rang incessantly. It was calls of reproach from shareholders and partners. The company's stock price began to plummet. James's personal image was severely damaged, and he had been reduced from a successful businessman to an indecisive man manipulated by his mistress. James roughly closed the tablet and threw it aside. He clutched his head, feeling as if his brain would explode. He remembered my calm and resigned eyes that night, my words, "Now we are even." At the time, he thought I was being stubborn. Only now did he realize it was the contempt of someone who had seen through the entire farce. "Stevens," James growled in a hoarse voice, "get the PR team on crisis management immediately and do a full background check on Bella, everything from her past to the present. I want to know everything." Mr. Stevens straightened up and nodded. "Sir, actually, I have already been conducting a discreet investigation. I was waiting for you to calm down before reporting. The file is here." With that, Mr. Stevens took a thick file from his briefcase and placed it in front of James. The look in Mr. Stevens's eyes was no longer the fear of a subordinate. It was the pity for someone who had gone too far down the wrong path. The spacious office was filled with a terrifying silence, broken only by the dry sound of rustling papers. James opened the file Mr. Stevens had given him. On the first page, his eyes fell on a copy of the medical records from the Miami General Hospital, where he had been treated after his accident. The bold letters danced before his eyes. Patient, James Anderson. Admitted by hotel staff. Medical bill payment and caregiver, none. The next morning, a woman named Sarah visited. James frowned, his heart pounding. He quickly turned to the next page. It was a statement from the hotel lobby staff and a screenshot from the hallway security camera footage. While he was unconscious from the shock, Bella was not there. She had only appeared the next morning after he was out of danger, cleverly playing the role of a devoted caregiver. "What is this?" James muttered, his trembling hands continuing to flip through the pages. The next pages were even more horrifying. There was evidence of Bella's inappropriate relationship with James's biggest competitor. Text messages, paparazzi photos of them meeting in a discreet bar. The rescue in Miami was no coincidence. Bella was a pawn planted to get close to him, using the pretext of saving his life to worm her way into his trust and steal the company's confidential information. And the last page completely broke him. It was a copy of the blood type test results and the blood donation record from the New York hospital where he had been admitted after his racing accident. Donor, Sarah Anderson. Blood type, Rh negative. Amount donated, 800 cc. James stared at the number 800 cc. He remembered that I had collapsed immediately after donating blood that day, but he had been completely unaware. He remembered the dark bruises on my arm that he had carelessly overlooked, busy tending to Bella's fake injuries. He remembered the cruel accusation he had hurled at me. "You truly are a heartless, cold-blooded woman." Tears streamed down his face, falling onto the white paper. Guilt washed over him like a tsunami, drowning him in endless regret. What have I done? He had treated his true savior and loyal wife like an enemy, while revering and loving a deceitful, venomous woman. "Sarah," James unconsciously called my name, his voice breaking. He buried his head in his desk, clutching his hair. The image of me, thin and pale, signing the divorce papers and turning away, haunted him. He had killed his own marriage, killed the woman who loved him most in the world, with his own hands. Mr. Stevens stood by, quietly watching his boss writhing in pain. He said softly, "Mr. Anderson, Mrs. Anderson endured too much. The day she left, she didn't take anything, including the alimony. She just said that she had repaid all her debts to you." Mr. Stevens's words were the final dagger that pierced James's heart. He shot up, his bloodshot eyes filled with a mixture of madness and determination. He wiped away his tears and said in a voice colder and more terrifying than ever, "Stevens, freeze every account I gave to Bella. Block all airports and ports. She dared to deceive me and harm my wife. I will make her regret the day she was born." James held the blood type test result, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the bold print. Donor, Sarah Anderson, 800cc. The number 800cc was a sharp blade, slicing open his dark and foolish heart. He remembered that day. My face, as white as paper, lying on the hospital bed. My arm, bruised dark blue from the thick needle, and him, pointing a finger at me, calling me a heartless, cold-blooded woman. It wasn't me who was heartless. The most heartless, cruel, and foolish person in the world was him. According to Mr. Stevens, James buried his head in his desk, his shoulders shaking as he sobbed, clutching his perfectly styled hair. He remembered every little detail he had willfully ignored. The fake bandage on Bella's wrist, her awkwardness when he asked about the blood donation process, and the resignation and sadness in my eyes before I signed the divorce papers. Everything clicked into place like sharp puzzle pieces, forming a stark and painful picture of the truth. He continued to flip through the documents about the rescue in Miami. The messages between Bella and his competitor, the paparazzi photos of them toasting after successfully trapping him, everything he had considered fate, the savior he had worshipped, the reason he had destroyed his family to protect, was in fact a meticulously crafted, sweet trap. Bella was not an angel who had saved his life. She was a venomous snake coiling around his neck, sucking the life out of him. "Sarah, I was wrong," James screamed in the confines of his locked office. The cry bounced off the walls, echoing mournfully and desperately like the howl of a wounded animal. But no matter how loud he screamed now, the loyal wife who had once been willing to give her life for him was no longer there. Regret is the cheapest and most meaningless thing in the world. Bella, who had lived her life through deception and acting, had sharp instincts. When James didn't come home for dinner, didn't answer his phone, and especially when the credit card he had given her was declined, Bella knew the curtain had been torn down. She didn't wait for James to come back to explain or beg. She knew his personality better than anyone. James might be a foolish romantic when in love, but in matters of business and betrayal, he was a ruthless wolf who showed no mercy to his enemies. Bella ran to the bedroom, pulled out her largest suitcase, and swept everything of value into it. She emptied the jewelry box James had gifted her, stuffing designer dresses and expensive handbags into the suitcase. Her hands trembled, and a pearl necklace scattered across the floor, but she didn't even think of picking it up. The most important things now were her life and her freedom. She booked the earliest night flight to Singapore, planning to flee the country before James could make a move. But Bella had underestimated James's power and Mr. Stevens's thoroughness. The taxi carrying Bella had just pulled up to the departure hall of JFK International Airport. She dragged her suitcase and rushed to the check-in counter. But as soon as she handed over her passport, the staff member looked at her strangely and said quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your passport is currently on a no-fly list at the request of law enforcement." "What? Are you crazy? What have I done to be banned from leaving the country?" Bella shrieked. Cold sweat poured down her face, her heavy makeup smudging. As she turned to run, two men in black suits with earpieces quietly approached from either side, blocking her escape. From the shadows behind them, a familiar figure emerged. James, wearing a black shirt with his hands in his pockets, his face cold and devoid of any emotion. He looked at the trembling Bella as if she were a dirty rat that had crawled out of the sewer. "Going somewhere, my savior?" James asked in a soft but menacing voice. "The show isn't over yet. It wouldn't do for the lead actress to leave so early. I haven't finished repaying my debt to you." Bella dropped her handbag, her legs giving out from under her, and she collapsed in the middle of the crowded airport lobby. She knew that this time she had truly hit a dead end. There was no way out. Bella was taken to a secluded room, completely cut off from the outside world. There was no assault or torture. James didn't want to dirty his own hands. He chose a more cruel punishment, to use the law and the truth to completely crush her. James threw a thick stack of documents in front of Bella. Inside was evidence of commercial fraud, theft of trade secrets, and embezzlement. Bella's face turned deathly pale as she looked at the documents. She ran and grabbed James's leg, singing the same sorrowful tune of the pitiful woman she had once successfully played, crying pathetically, "James, please forgive me. Someone else made me do it. My love for you was real. Don't you remember? In Miami, when we—" "Shut up!" James yelled, kicking her away. "How dare you say the word real in front of me? Did you love me, or my wallet and the title of Mrs. Anderson? You even staged a suicide attempt to harm my wife. Now, I'll make you feel that pain 100 times over." He signaled for Mr. Stevens to open the door. 2 police officers entered and read out an arrest warrant for Bella on charges of fraud and industrial espionage. The money she had extorted from James and the damages caused by leaking confidential information to his competitor meant she would be rotting in prison for a very long time. As the cold handcuffs were clasped around her wrists, Bella screamed and cursed at James, calling him a heartless, despicable man. But James just lit a cigarette and watched her being dragged away with an indifferent expression, as if watching a bag of trash being taken out. "What goes around comes around," James muttered. The cigarette smoke billowed up, obscuring his haggard face. After dealing with Bella, James returned to the large mansion. But this time, he felt no sense of victory. A wave of emptiness washed over him, surrounding him. He wandered through the rooms, touching the inanimate furniture. Bella was gone, the enemy was punished, but the most important person was still missing. He opened the closet and looked at the empty space where my simple dresses used to hang. He went to the kitchen and saw the old apron I always wore. My shadow was deeply embedded in every corner of the house, but my warmth was gone. James sank to the floor, hugged his knees, and began to cry like an abandoned child. After resolving the issue with Bella, James began searching for me like a man possessed. He neglected his company, delegating all his work to his subordinates, and spent his days in a haze of alcohol and intense longing. He hired the best private investigators and offered a reward of hundreds of thousands of dollars for any information on my whereabouts. The moment even the faintest tip came in, he would set off immediately, regardless of the time of day or the weather. Once, he heard that someone who looked like me was in a remote town near the Canadian border. He drove all night, crossing rugged mountain roads. But when the woman turned around, the crushing disappointment of it not being me was all he had to bring back. James returned home, thin, unshaven, his eyes sunken from insomnia. He started having hallucinations. He would see me sitting at the dining table, smiling and waiting for him. He would see me on the balcony, watering the plants and humming a song. But when he rushed to embrace the vision, it would vanish into thin air, leaving only a cold, empty space. "Sarah, where are you? Please come back. I'm begging you," James would cry out in a drunken stupor, destroying things in the house to vent his frustration. He regretted not cherishing me, regretted the venom he had spewed at me, regretted letting me leave with a broken heart. Then one day, an investigator sent him a photo taken from a distance. In the photo, a small framed woman in an apron was baking bread in a small bakery by the beach. It was a side profile and quite blurry, but James immediately recognized her posture, the way she tied her hair. It was me. Seaside, Oregon. James read the address written below. He clutched the photo to his chest, his hands trembling, his heart pounding as if it would burst. He immediately booked the fastest flight. Looking down at the white clouds from the plane, James's mind was a mess. He imagined the scene of our reunion. He would kneel, grab my leg, and promise to spend the rest of his life making it up to me. He believed that with our 5 years of deep love, I would soften and forgive him, just as I always had. But James didn't know. In that windy coastal town, I was no longer the woman who cried alone in a cold kitchen. I was living a new life, peaceful and free, without the shadow of betrayal and lies. And most importantly, by my side now was a shoulder 10,000 times more dependable and warmer than his. When the taxi carrying James stopped on the sunny, windy coastal road, he took a deep breath and adjusted his collar. He got out of the car with the faint hope of putting a broken mirror back together. But he could never have imagined that the scene that would unfold before him would be the final and most painful punishment for a man who did not cherish the happiness he held in his hands. The early morning sea breeze carried its unique salty scent through the teal-colored window frame, scattering the white flour lingering in the air. My bakery was nestled modestly on a small street corner. There was no flashy sign, but the warm, nutty aroma of freshly baked bread and butter drew in passers-by. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and transferred the golden-brown croissants onto a wooden tray. It had been 3 months since I had fled that cold mansion. 3 months, not a long time, but enough for me to be reborn. Here, I was no longer the wife of a famous corporate CEO, the Sarah who spent her days cooped up in a corner of the kitchen waiting for her husband. I was just Sarah, a bakery owner who woke up early and went to bed late. My hands were stained with flour and sugar, but my heart was strangely at peace. Outside the window, a black luxury sedan pulled up. It stood out among the old motorcycles of the fishing town. The car door opened, and a man got out. He was wearing a wrinkled suit, his beard was unkempt, and his eyes were sunken like someone who hadn't slept in a long time. I was bent over, taking out almond cookies, so I didn't notice the strange customer until the wind chime above the door tinkled, announcing his arrival. "Welcome! Fresh bread is just out of the oven." I looked up, a practiced, commercial smile on my face. But the smile froze instantly, as if doused with cold water. Standing before me was my ex-husband, James. The man who had pushed me to the ground, the man who had viciously humiliated me for his mistress. Now he was staring at me as if he had seen a ghost. His eyes were a mixture of surprise, pain, and a frantic longing. He looked at me, then at the cozy space around me. He saw that I was healthy, my complexion was good, and I wore a radiant smile he had never seen in the 5 years we lived together. He saw that I was truly alive, not just existing beside his glamorous life. James's lips trembled as he spoke in a cracked voice. "Sarah, you're here. Do you know how hard I looked for you?" I stood behind the counter, gripping the edge of my apron. A wave of instinctual fear washed over me for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of calm. I realized that the man standing before me looked truly pathetic. Gone was the arrogant, cold demeanor of the past, replaced by the image of a failure clinging to the past. I didn't answer, quietly picking up a pair of tongs and placing a warm loaf of bread into a paper bag. My ordinary action, treating him like any other customer, pained James more than any accusation could have. He realized that in my eyes, he was no longer the center of my world. Just as James was about to step behind the counter and grab my hand, a tall man emerged from the back of the kitchen, blocking his path. It was Ethan. He was wearing a white t-shirt smudged with flour, and beads of sweat dotted his strong arms. Ethan was my childhood best friend. He had a crush on me all through school but never confessed because of his poor background. When I ran away, it was Ethan who welcomed me with open arms. He helped me open this bakery, taught me how to knead dough, control the heat, and most importantly, how to love myself again. Ethan put down a tray of hot bread and looked straight at James with sharp eyes. No introduction was needed. A man's instinct immediately recognizes his rival. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked in a low, firm voice. "If you're not buying anything, please leave. You're disturbing our business," James faltered. His gaze shifted from Ethan to me and back to Ethan. He saw Ethan gently wipe a smudge of flour from my cheek, a natural, protective gesture he had never shown me. He saw that what was in Ethan's eyes was not possession or condescension, but absolute respect. A fierce jealousy burned in James's heart. He pointed a finger at Ethan's face and growled, "Who the hell are you? How dare you stand next to my wife? Sarah, is this why you left me? How long have you been shacking up with this baker?" I stepped out from behind the counter and stood in front of Ethan. I looked at James with eyes that no longer held any emotion, only pity for a twisted soul. I said, my voice clear and steady, "James, take a look at yourself. What right do you have to question me? We are divorced, legally and cleanly. Who I love, who I live with, that's my freedom. Do you think a man who made his wife kneel on a rainy night for his mistress has any right to be jealous?" James staggered back as if struck by a physical blow, bumping into a bread display and knocking a few loaves to the floor. He realized that the position of the man protecting me, the position he had once monopolized and disdained, now belonged to someone else. And more painfully, that someone else was 10,000 times more deserving of it than he was. Ethan said nothing, quietly bending down to pick up the fallen bread, dusting it off, and setting it aside. His calm action only highlighted James's violent, out-of-control behavior. In this small bakery, James, the once powerful CEO, suddenly became a shabby, unnecessary presence. James took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He knew he was at a disadvantage, that his current tantrum would only push me further away. He quickly changed his attitude, switching from anger to pleading. He ran to his car and brought back a large bouquet of daisies, flowers I had once loved but he had always ridiculed as childish and cheap. He came back in, holding the bouquet, and suddenly knelt on the floor in front of me. His action startled the few customers in the shop, who looked on with curious eyes. "Sarah, I was wrong." "I know the truth now," James said, tears starting to stream down his face. "I know you donated blood to save me. I know Bella deceived me and was working with my competitor to harm me. It's all out. I sent her to prison. I got revenge for you. Please, come back to me. I'm begging you. I'll make it all up to you. I'll give you anything you want." I looked at the white daisies in his hand. My heart felt no ripple of emotion. I used to wish so desperately that he would remember these flowers. But now that he had brought them, they felt like a wreath for a dead love. I took a step back, avoiding his hand as he reached for the hem of my dress. I shook my head, my voice as light as the wind. "James, you know the truth. You sent that woman to prison. Do you think that heals the wounds in my heart? Do you think I'm a machine, that you can just press a button and the love will start again?" "That's not what I meant," James stammered, his face a mess of tears. "I know I'm a terrible person. I know I'm scum. But we were together for 5 years, the debt I owe your father." "Don't you dare bring up my father," I shouted, cutting him off. It was the last line I would not let him cross. My father died to save a person, not a betrayer. You repaid that debt with the divorce papers and the humiliation you inflicted on his daughter. There are no more debts between us. Your regret is too cheap and meaningless to me now." James stared at me, stunned. He realized that the weak, obedient woman he once knew was truly dead. Before him stood a woman who had weathered the storm, whose heart had been hardened by false sweetness. He looked down at the bouquet in his hand. The delicate petals seemed to mock his belated remorse. "You really don't have any feelings left for me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I looked him straight in the eye. My own eyes were dry, without a single tear. "The feelings are dead. Go home. Don't dirty the floor of my shop." Being so brutally rejected in public was a severe blow to James's pride. Regret and pain turned into a crazed rage. He shot up and threw the bouquet to the floor. The petals scattered. "How dare you speak to me like that?" James growled, about to grab my shoulders and shake me. "I've humbled myself this much, and you still act so high and mighty? You think this country baker is better than me? What can he give you? A cottage and a love made of gold? Don't make me laugh." But before his hand could touch me, it was caught in a grip as strong as a steel clamp. Ethan had stepped in front of me again. His eyes were burning, but his face was terrifyingly calm. "Let go of her," Ethan growled, squeezing James's wrist. James grimaced in pain. "I told you. You have no right to touch her. You're not welcome here. Get out, now." James struggled, but he couldn't break free from the strength of a man hardened by physical labor. He threw a punch in a fit of rage, but Ethan quickly dodged and, with a simple move, threw James to the floor. The impact wasn't severe, but for James, it was a profound humiliation. He lay there, his expensive suit dirtied with dust and trampled flower petals. The customers in the shop stood up, whispering and pointing. I placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder and said gently, "Ethan, that's enough. Don't bother with him. Don't dirty your hands." "But Sarah..." Ethan let go of James and turned to me, his expression immediately softening. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you, but I couldn't just let him treat you like that." I nodded, smiling reassuringly, and turned to the staggering James. I no longer felt anger or satisfaction, only pity. Pity for a man who had everything: money, status, power, but had lost the most important things: character and true love. "Go home," I said, my voice calm but as cold as ice. "And don't come here again. Don't make me call the police. That would be quite embarrassing for the CEO of Anderson Global, wouldn't it?" James looked at me, then at Ethan, who stood like a mountain protecting me. He knew he had lost, completely and utterly lost. He dusted off his clothes, trying to salvage the last shred of his dignity. His retreating figure looked lonely and pathetic under the setting sun, like a beggar who had just been robbed of his last possession. The luxury sedan disappeared around the corner of the coastal road, but the aftermath of the commotion lingered heavily in the small space of the bakery. Most of the customers had left, and only a few regulars remained, looking at me with concern. Ethan said nothing, quietly getting a broom and sweeping up the scattered, crushed daisy petals. His broad back was bent, and his sweeping was gentle, as if careful not to disturb my troubled heart. Looking at him, a strangely peaceful feeling welled up inside me. A feeling I had never once experienced in the 5 years I lived as James's wife, dressed in silk. I thought James would give up after that humiliating incident, but I had underestimated the obsession of a man who had lost everything. The next morning, when I opened the shop door to greet the early morning sun, James was already there. Gone was the violent, arrogant man from yesterday. He looked haggard and exhausted, like a withered tree. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his beard was unkempt, and his sunken eyes were filled with pleading. When I came out, James rushed over and, with a trembling hand, took out a small object, wrapped neatly in a white handkerchief, from his jacket pocket. He unfolded the handkerchief and placed the object in the palm of my hand. It was the old wedding ring. The one I had abandoned, the one Bella had thrown in the trash, and the one he had eventually retrieved. James's voice was hoarse, like the sound of the wind seeping through a narrow crack in the door. "Sarah, look, I still have it. I haven't taken it off once. You still have feelings for me, don't you? Let's start over, please." I held the ring. The cold touch of the metal on my skin gave me goosebumps. This object was once a treasure, a symbol of a lifelong vow. But now, looking at it, all I saw was an endless cycle of deception and pain. The names of the two of us engraved on the inside were still there, but they had been faded by time and scratches, just like our shattered marriage. I looked up at James, then at the distant horizon. White waves ceaselessly rolled onto the sandy beach. I said softly, "James, do you know why people throw rings into the sea? It's not because of hatred. It's because they want to bury the memories they no longer wish to remember." Before James could react, I clenched the ring in my hand, crossed the street, and walked straight to the stone breakwater. James screamed my name and rushed after me. The sea breeze blew through my hair, bringing with it the salty taste of freedom. I stood on the breakwater and, with all my might, threw the ring far into the distance. The small object glittered for a moment under the sunlight, tracing a beautiful arc before falling with a soft plop into the vast ocean, disappearing among the countless waves. "No! Sarah, what are you doing?" James ran over and leaned over the railing as if to find it again, but all he could see was white foam. I turned to him and smiled with relief. "It's gone. Our 5 years of marriage, our bond, it's all sunk to the bottom of the sea with that thing. Go home. Don't try to salvage something that's already dead." My decisiveness seemed to have shattered the last bit of reason James had left. He didn't leave, nor did he cause another scene begging me to come back. He became a ghostly presence, clinging to my life like a desperate lie. James got a room at a luxury hotel near the bakery and showed up at the shop every day, from opening to closing time. He didn't bother the customers, nor did he fight with Ethan. He just sat quietly in a corner, ordered one iced Americano, and stared at me all day. His gaze was dark, filled with regret and extreme pain, sometimes giving me chills. He started drinking instead of eating. Some days, the strong smell of alcohol from him filled a corner of the shop with a sour scent, a stark contrast to the sweet aroma of butter and milk. To express his foolish remorse, James would buy all the bread on the display every day. He would place a thick wad of cash on the counter and tell the staff in a drunken voice, "Pack it all up. My wife worked hard to make it, so I should buy it all so she can rest early." Ethan would frown at the sight and try to kick him out, but I would stop him. I told the staff to take the money, every last cent, and I sent all the bread to the local orphanage and nursing home. I didn't want the fruits of my labor to be wasted, and I certainly didn't want to accept charity paid for with his money. James would watch me give the bread away to others and not object, just laughing foolishly. "You're still so kind. If you like to donate, I'll buy it for you. I have a lot of money. I can buy as much as you want." Looking at James, who was growing more haggard and unkempt by the day, I no longer felt hatred, only pity. The once mighty CEO, the object of desire for countless women, had been reduced to a pathetic stalker simply because he hadn't cherished what he had. One day, Ethan came back from a delivery and saw James passed out on a table, sleeping next to an empty liquor bottle. Ethan sighed and said to me, "Are you just going to let him continue like this? He looks like a dying flame." I was kneading dough and replied, my voice calm but with a hint of sadness, "It's his choice. People only realize things when they hit rock bottom. I can't save someone who doesn't want to save himself." And so, James sat there every day like a living statue, watching Ethan and me work together, laugh together. He was punishing himself by watching the happiness that should have been his, now held completely in the hands of another. There is a limit to human endurance, and James's body was no exception. Days soaked in alcohol, an untreated chronic stomach condition, and an immense psychological blow pushed him to the brink. That day, it was raining cats and dogs. The whimsical coastal rain came without warning and fell with great force. The rain pounded on the tin roof of the bakery, creating a loud noise. All the customers had left, and only Ethan and I were cleaning up to close. James was still sitting in his usual corner, but today he looked much worse than usual. His face was deathly pale, he was sweating profusely, and he was clutching his stomach with both hands, curled up in his chair. As I was closing the cash register, I heard a sharp crash. The coffee cup on James's table had fallen to the floor and shattered. I turned to look and saw James slowly sliding off his chair and onto the cold floor. "James!" I shouted in alarm, throwing down my dishcloth and running over. Ethan also rushed out from the kitchen. By the time we reached him, James was already curled up on the floor, foaming at the mouth, his breathing weak and irregular. A trickle of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, staining the collar of his yellowed white shirt red. "Stomach bleeding! Call 911, quick!" Ethan shouted, lifting James up in his arms. James's body was terrifyingly light, a far cry from his former imposing figure. While waiting for the ambulance, Ethan laid him down on a bench and administered first aid. I stood by, looking at my ex-husband's face, contorted in pain, and felt an endless sense of pity. The hatred was gone, but I couldn't be indifferent to a life fading away before my eyes. James faintly opened his eyes and tried to grab the hem of my dress with his cold hand. He moved his lips and said in a voice so weak only I could hear, "Sarah, save me. It hurts so much. I don't want to die yet. I want to atone." Out of human compassion, not love, I held his gaunt hand. I tried to reassure him, saying softly, "Don't talk. The ambulance will be here soon. You'll be okay." The wail of the ambulance siren cut through the dark, rainy night. The paramedics rushed in and placed James on a stretcher. Ethan quickly put on a raincoat and said to me, "Stay here and watch the shop. I'll go with him to the hospital. I'll call you if anything happens." The surgery lasted for over 5 hours, but there was no miracle. The doctor came out of the operating room and shook his head sadly, saying that James had suffered from acute stomach bleeding, compounded by severe liver failure from long-term drinking and weakness, making recovery impossible. He only had a few hours left. Ethan called me. I closed the shop and took a taxi to the hospital that night. When I entered the intensive care unit, James was lying there, surrounded by all sorts of machines and tubes. His face was gaunt, his skin jaundiced, but his eyes were surprisingly clear. A pitiful light, like a flame about to go out. Seeing me, James managed a faint smile, a weak but peaceful smile, devoid of pain or anguish. He beckoned me closer. "Sarah," James whispered, "thank you for coming, one last time." I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the man who was once the entirety of my youth. All the resentment and injustice melted away, leaving only compassion for a lost life. I said softly, "Rest. It'll be hard for you to talk." James shook his head slightly. "No, I have to say it. I was wrong, Sarah. I spent my whole life chasing empty things and lost the most precious jewel. I owed my life to your father, and I owe you a happy life. I can't repay it all in this life. I can only hope that in the next, I can spend an eternity atoning for it." I held his hand, which was growing colder, and shook my head. "The next life is too far away. Don't make any promises. Just go in peace. I forgive you. It's all in the past." Hearing my forgiveness, 2 streams of tears rolled down James's gaunt cheeks. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of gratitude and regret, and then he slowly closed his eyes. The continuous beep of the heart monitor echoed through the room, officially announcing the end of a tumultuous life. When I left the hospital, the dawn was just breaking. The rain that had been falling all night had stopped. The sky, washed clean by the storm, was clearer and higher than ever. The early morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, making the wet roads sparkle. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the fresh morning air. My heart felt light, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. James was free from his pain, and I was free from the ghosts of the past. I took a taxi back to the bakery. From a distance, I could see Ethan standing in front of the shop, cleaning the front yard with a hose. When he saw me return, he turned off the water and ran over, his eyes full of concern. "Are you okay?" I looked at him, nodded, and smiled more brightly than ever. "Yes, I'm okay. He's gone, peacefully." Ethan said nothing, just opened his arms and held me tight. The warmth from his chest warmed my once cold heart. I rested my head on his shoulder and listened to the sound of the waves caressing the sandy beach. We walked into the shop together. The familiar, warm aroma of flour and butter filled the air again. I put on my apron and started kneading a new batch of dough for the day. Life goes on, and I knew that before me lay a vast future, peaceful and full of love, by the side of the man who truly cherished me. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with another story.